Studies estimate that Africa presently faces an infrastructure investment deficit of $90 billion per annum if it is to realize the desired infrastructure needs of the continent. Within the context of SADC, the current infrastructure gap is estimated at $100 billion, covering regional trunk road network, inter-regional railway network, ports and inland waterways development, power infrastructure, ICT, and postals and strategic water development infrastructures. SADC, through the Secretariat, is presently developing an infrastructure development master plan for the region, which will in turn feed into the African Union's Programme for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA. The SADC ministers responsible for infrastructure development endorsed a strategy to promote the use of public-private partnerships in financing infrastructure projects. Specifically, they mandated the SADC Secretariat to coordinate the leveraging of private sector funding for investment on infrastructure projects through public-private partnerships in order to alleviate member states' public finance, which is constrained.
Why now for Africa infrastructure, PPP, and this knowledge exchange is terribly important? This is a result of, this is a finding of the Africa Infrastructure Country Diagnostic Report. It's a major study that the World Bank did with many other development partners. And more broadly, in addition to the numbers you see, if you look at the first one, you see low-income countries in sub-Saharan Africa, paved density is 31 kilometers per 100 square kilometers of arable land. Other low-income countries is 134. If you look at generation capacity, it's 37 megawatts per million inhabitants versus 326 in other parts. Clearly in Africa, if we are going to reduce poverty and increase growth, the infrastructure asset investments have to be much higher. And basically the infrastructure, Africa Infrastructure Country Diagnostic concludes that in Africa, the infrastructure required in low-income countries is much less than in other developing countries. There is a broad estimate that it cuts growth rates by 2% per year and that it reduces business productivity, for instance, by 40%. So it's a big challenge. When you look at this massive deficit, obviously the government has to play its role, but also the private sector has to play its role. And therefore PPPs are incredibly important, and this particular event is quite important. But PPPs are no panacea, and they can be done well, they can be done badly. And they may not happen at all if it's not done well. And so they need to be properly structured and regulated. In the area of PPP, because things have been changing so rapidly, and after the financial crisis, the private sector, government ability, everything has been shifting. This area does not lend itself as easily as other areas to formal training courses, because the knowledge is fluid, and therefore peer learning is extremely important. People want to learn from each other because it's a very fast changing area, and that is why this event is extremely important.
Led by Martin Creamer, Mining Weekly's bureaus in Perth, Johannesburg and Toronto deliver unrivaled global coverage of the resources industry and the companies shaping it. Creamer Media's Mining Weekly for mining news around the clock.